All right, well, hello everybody. And hello to Washington, D.C. I was born in Washington, D.C., so this is like coming home. I was telling my friend this morning over breakfast that my parents were actually living in Montgomery, Alabama at the time, and my mom didn't trust any of the obstetricians in Montgomery. So her family was in Washington, so when she was about 7 months pregnant, she came up here so that she could have a really good doctor, so that when I was born, I would actually be here. So, hello, Washington. Well, how much time do you want me to spend, Carolyn? Okay. I guess let me just address, since you've seen the video, you really know pretty much all there is to know about me. But, just this whole aspect of the business side of it and women and the business's perception of women. Yet, boy, having been in this business as long as I have, I really have to say, I think unfortunately so, that I'm not sure a whole lot has changed in terms of how our industry perceives of women. I mean, there are a lot of great companies out there that have introduced lines of bicycles for women, and kudos to them for doing that. They've taken women's measurements, I guess, or geometry into account, but I still think that there's a real disconnect between that level and the retail bicycle dealer. There are some fantastic dealers out there. I don't want to whitewash everybody or brush everybody with the same brush, but there's just still, I don't know where it's coming from, this kind of resistance almost. A woman goes into a bike shop and there's an assumption made right off the top of it, which is that you're probably here for a hybrid bike, right? And you probably don't want to spend a whole lot of money on it. And it's very, I think, discouraging to a lot of women. It's an environment sometimes they don't really feel particularly comfortable in. And I wish I had the magic bullet, the way to improve that. I'm not really sure what it is. I mean, I can remember when we were in business, not only were we selling bikes, but as we got into apparel and saddles and other products like that, we had some really terrific products, but we just couldn't get them into that independent bicycle retailer chain for some reason. They just weren't receptive. And we had tons of customers who called on the phone and said, can I just buy from you direct? I mean, do I really have to go to a dealer? And we kind of said, okay, fine. And at that point came out with a catalog. But there's just such an incredible opportunity that's been missed, I think, as a result of that. And I hope over the next few hours here, maybe some of the discussions we have and talking to other people, we'll figure out how to get to the bottom of that, because if you really want to get bicycling, just take off and go like crazy, you got to have those guys involved for sure. I mean, they're a key piece of it. They work hard. They deserve all the business we can give them. Now, we just have to get them to kind of come around a little bit to a different perspective, I think, on things. I think that would certainly help a lot. At this point, some of you may know that I no longer work for Terry Bicycles. After that company was sold to a private investor in Vermont, I stayed on for 3 years under an employment agreement and left last May. And when I left, I took with me their line of hand-built bicycles. The new CEO of the company just felt that without my expertise there, it wasn't a good business move for the company to try and continue to really actively sell bicycles. So if you need me, I'm at georginaterry.com. And my bicycles are built by Waterford, and I do sell through retail shops occasionally. We have a couple of excellent dealers. Harris Cyclery in Massachusetts is one. Bodacious Bicycles in Easton, Maryland is another one. But for the most part, I just do this one-on-one with women. It's what I started doing. It's what I still do now, and it's something I feel really comfortable with. So I think that's about it, if you just want a quick gloss over that. But I'll be here for questions. Anytime you want me, feel free. I'm very accessible.
So we'll do it Oprah style. We'll sit in the
Do I have to say something like, honestly, Oprah, we sued so many people?
Good one.
Sorry. It's a great line.
It's a great line. Now I'm giggling to start off. So, you guys both have been frame builders, and the heads of your companies have been at various times. And I'm wondering what the difference is since you started, Georgina, and since you started, Natalie. How have things changed? How have your experiences differed starting your brands, growing them, finding your place in the marketplace and in the bicycle industry? I'm hoping that the answer is that it's gotten easier, but maybe some things have changed so that it's not easier for you, Natalie. Yeah.
Well, you probably have the more long-term historical perspective of
Unfortunately,
how
yes.
things have changed. No, it's a good thing. But I know that when I started, there was this big question of, well, you want to do high-end bikes for women? It seemed to be almost a contradiction in terms that it seemed like, gosh, the pie of custom frame building is small enough as it is. Why would you choose to throw out 90% of the people who actually buy custom bikes and focus on that, very small proportion of custom bike buyers? And I looked at it more as that was the wrong question to be asking. There were all kinds of women who were not being served by any portion of the bike industry. And if there was a genuine problem to be solved, it seemed like there was an opportunity to solve it. But my experience was that people generally questioned the wisdom of trying to sell something to women in bicycle form that cost more than $600. So I suspect that hasn't changed since your first experience.
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty similar. I ran into the same thing where I said, this is what I'm going to do. And everybody looked at me and said, you're going to what? You know, and to me that was kind of motivation in a funny kind of way. What I've found is it'd be interesting to compare our demographics for customers, because right now the woman that I work with is almost always over 45 or 50. She's not the 30-something or early 40s. Maybe that has something to do with the price point, because you've got to get to a certain point before you can afford it. But what worries me a little bit is I'm afraid that we might be missing younger women to some extent. I mean, you appeal, I think, to your customers on a totally different way than I did. You were much more artistic and creative than I ever was. I'm like hardcore engineering. You're like cool names, great look. It's just, I look at your stuff and go, shit. If I had only worked a little bit of that into my line. But what is your demographic like? I'm curious.
I would say that my demographic does include some women who are younger, and probably in part because I live in Portland. And
yeah, you got a great market.
Yeah, and so there's a market where people at all levels are committed to bicycling in their lives. So whether it's a student whose, graduation present from their parents is a hand-built bike, or whether it is, just a woman who's like, hey, this is my car, and so I'm going to spend as much on it as I would on a, old Toyota,
sure,
or whatever.
Yeah.
But I am probably with you in seeing that general concentration of women are coming to me who've been on a bike for 20 years, and they've gotten to a point in their life where they say...
And it's usually been steel?
And it's usually been steel, and it's like a Centurion, it's an Ishiki, it's a whatever, but it worked for them for 20 years, and they've put up with it, but then they get to a point where they say, wow, you know what? Lifetime Achievement Award, I've been biking, and I've been, I've gone across the country, and I've done this and that, and it's time that I had a bike that I actually loved and that actually fit me. And so I wish we were capturing more of the women on the front end who are about to embark on all of those miles and all of that muscle memory and all of that biking, but start out doing it on something that would allow them to enjoy it more. I sometimes I'm like, okay, just amortize over the next 15 years and think, okay, will I get to 15 years on a crappy bike and then think I regret all the miles and the years on the crappy bike? Or can you think ahead and say, yeah, this is something that in my body I know I get a lot of pleasure from, and I want to put the money into something that I will be able to enjoy. But I think boy, I understand it. I was a bike messenger. I paid $300 for bikes for a really long time. So I totally get it. But I just wish there were more options available for sensibly fitting bikes at all levels, so that women didn't have to wait until, their kids were out of college or whatever point it is in their life where they feel like they can spend money on themselves.
I'm curious too, maybe you want to jump in, I don't know if you have something planned, but steel.
Yeah.
You gotta love steel. I was thinking about this the other night, and sometimes steel is such a tough sell. Especially when you're going up against a really sexy fabric, a sexy material like carbon fiber.
Yep.
Aluminum, not so much so. And it occurred to me, I think that steel has a marketing issue. And I think that
Totally.
that we have a tough time, and I haven't figured out personally how to get around this, of how to frame the steel argument. I mean, framing is a big deal in all kinds of situations.
Yep.
But it seems that no matter anything you say that's good about steel, the conversation always gets back to, but it's heavy. And you go, but it's heavy.
Right.
How are we going to fix that?
When I worked at a bike shop, I was interested in, women's products and sought out, I think it was just when you were coming out with the catalog. It's like, oh, okay, great. But that, the bikes, I didn't understand. I was like, okay, steel is heavy. I'm a woman. I don't weigh as much. I don't
So
need a heavy
proportionately,
bike.
I'm at a disadvantage.
It didn't make
Yeah.
sense to me at the time. And it didn't have anyone to explain, well, all the advantages. It lasts a long time. It's comfortable. It's not necessarily heavy.
Right. And I
Not at all.
tend to steer the conversation toward the value that's in the design. That you can look at material qualities and you can compare relative weights, but what I'm looking to do for a customer is make that bike frame relate to their body in such a way that they're efficient, they're comfortable, they're powerful. At the basic level, there's no pain. A frame that can deliver that to you is going to help you go faster than ill-fitting carbon fiber bike. And I say, boy, let's look at the frame itself as the very kind of fundamental of what we're doing here. And if we're trying to achieve lightweight, boy, let's talk wheel sets. Let's talk about, different options for whether it's carbon handlebars or seat post or what have you. Let's lighten it up in other ways, because the last thing I want is to have a perfectly fitting, highly disposable bike, because that's what we're putting our focus on. So I try to steer the conversation toward that, but I know that I probably am not having conversations with women who
That's right.
aren't already a little bit sold on the idea, or at
Right.
least amenable to the idea of steel.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's like the people we're talking to are already part of the converted, so
Right.
it makes it tough. But I do wonder, from an industry standpoint, will this industry ever come back to steel? I'm seeing people probably nodding no, because there's so many price advantages to aluminum, to carbon fiber. You can get those frames so inexpensively. And unfortunately, I think the industry does steel no favors, because when they do come out with a steel bike, it's usually a clunker. There are a few exceptions to that, but it's like pipe, and then everybody's perception is based off of that.
Yep.
Well, you said disposable, and I have to wonder if that's part of, maybe the unspoken, that they don't want you to buy a bike that's going to last 20 years.
Well, that's one of the questions. Do you frame the whole issue of people are very, very responsive to anything that affects safety or health? You can say what you want, but if you start pressing the safety and health issues, boom, the topic comes right up to the top. But I always feel
And the
funny.
failure modes of various materials. We like to talk about that.
Yeah, but you hate to sell a product from that viewpoint, and that's not always the right viewpoint.
Right.
Can't steel just be steel, especially today.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not opposed to, a great fitting carbon fiber bike is really appropriate for a lot of riders. It can
Absolutely.
It can be a really cool thing if your goals are performance oriented, and you know in your mind that, boy, I'm going to have this bike for a couple of years, and then it's time to replace it, and that's sort of part of your buying decision, I think titanium can be awesome. Like,
Yeah.
what's not to love about titanium? It's unfortunately out of the price range of a lot of people. But the reason why I mostly, why I'm doing steel is, boy, that's what I build in. It's kind of my, it's what I love to ride. And so I from there, I have an easy time talking about what it can provide and what I can do with it.
I think one of the other neat things about steel is it has such an incredible personality. I mean, if I look at carbon fiber, I think plastic. If I look at aluminum, I think beer cans. But there was this great film done with Dario Pegoretti. Did you ever see it?
Yes.
Yeah, when he's talking about steel, and one of the things he says about it is it's honest. And I'm sure this has probably happened to you. I can remember I would build up a frame, and I'm doing the last little bit of alignment check on it, and maybe I find out the rear triangle is 128 when I want it to be 130.
Right.
So I cold set to 130. I'm done for the night. I come back the next morning, and the darn it's back at 128. Yeah, it's like it just steel has a memory, they say, and so you have to learn to compensate for that. But it's just the coolest thing. It's like it's playing games with you.
Yeah.
So neat.
Yeah. Whether it's a game
Only
or
you
a
can appreciate that.
conversation.
Everybody's out there going, "Oh my God, they're crazy."
Whole setting, what?
Yeah.
This a little bit, but I'd like to know, in the broader sense, why do you guys think, you ladies, women, why do you think that it's important to have women be the heads of companies, to be not just bike builders, but producing their own brand, producing their own products, at the top of the pyramid of a bike company? Why is it important for women to be in those positions?
I get to go first. Some women shouldn't be in those positions, that's for sure. But
That's true.
they're
Men and women.
I think that women just bring a different perspective to a business, whether it's bicycling or it's anything else. I mean, I think they're more maybe humanitarian about the whole issue of running a business with respect to their employees, to their customers, to the products that they ultimately design. I know that when I owned Terry, the company was like one big family. I mean, it was pizza every Thursday, and you had to take care of the kid and couldn't get into work on time. It didn't matter, because you're going to get that back. Employees are going to appreciate that. And I think, if you have women at the top, then they can work their ideas down a little bit into the bottom. I think, I hate to keep saying I think, but really, I would like to see more women involved in independent bicycle retailers.
I'm with you on that.
That's where we're fighting the battle more than any other place, and that's where the influence could be so great.
Yeah, if I had the opportunity to tackle the kinds of problems that I was wanting to tackle in an established bike company, boy, I'm more interested in doing what it is that I'm doing than in necessarily running a company. And but what I see is that I have an opportunity to work with women in a way that most people working in bike retail can't, in that I think everyone is very well intentioned. Male or female, most bike shop employees really want to serve every single customer that walks in the door. But unless the wages are high enough to retain really good employees who are gaining experience, and not just 20-year-old dudes who really know that they can fit on any track bike that they sit on and any saddle that it comes with, we aren't really going to be able to address everybody who walks through the door. And I think where we miss a lot of women is in having a conversation where there's truly hearing what they're feeling, what they need, and giving them the skills, giving the bike shop employees the skills to get a woman on an appropriate bike for what they're looking for, without all the assumptions about you need a hybrid or you don't want 650C wheels, or whatever those biases are. If there are better skills in bike fitting at the shop level, I think women could be more greatly accommodated, but I'm doing what I'm doing because I don't see that happening yet.
Yeah.
You made a good point, or you said a good phrase earlier, grabbing them on the front end. You know, when someone first gets into bicycling, their first experience might be, oh, I might check out the bike shop today. And if they go in and walk out 10 minutes later insulted, then, you know, we might have lost grabbing another cult member.
Right, and what I've realized is that I have a really, really lucky position. And as do you. What we get to do is work with individual customers. They have a specific riding style, a specific body, specific goals. And I start with their body and everything in their life, and we design the frame from the ground up. And then we, you know, get the parts together, the paint and all of that. And then we get to, you know, refit and check in with our customer. How's that working for you? So we've got this feedback loop of we design, you know, if we fit, we design, we then see, hey, how's that in real life? Bikes that are in bike shops are primarily there as a result of what sold the year before, and not a result of bike shop employees understanding and then relaying back to bike makers what's working and what's not. I mean, if you're selling bikes that don't fit and then don't get ridden, you're not going to know how to change them. And if you don't... So.
I think something else that's always been kind of tough for me is, from a marketing standpoint, how do you reach that woman? I mean, we did studies on this, like, what is this woman reading? What magazines? Is she a fan of bicycling? Is she eating that up? Is she reading Velo? Is she going to certain bicycling blogs on the web? She's like so all over the place compared to a guy who's so much more focused, and it makes it really tough. You know, where are your marketing efforts going to go to try and reach her?
And this ties into a question that I was really wanting to ask you, which is, you know, you and I are both approaching, you know, women's cycling with the brazing torch and with a really analytical mind, and we both have set out to solve, you know, the question of how to get more bikes, you know, to women that fit well. And to what extent is this only a design problem? You know, is there this other component that, you know, as owners of bike companies, we need to be addressing as well?
Wow.
Yeah. If you can crack that nut, it would be really helpful to me.
Gee, if I'd cracked that nut, we would. Yeah, I think there is more to it than that, because frankly, I think women respond to the concept of a bike that fits well, that's comfortable, that they're going to be efficient on. But, you know, some of the level that we get into on the engineering and stuff is like, you know, just not that it's not understood, but it's like not where I am. You're not getting to me with that point of view. So with Terry, I think a lot of our success as a company was because we promoted women in cycling. You know, we were women who cycled. We made products as a result of our own experience. And I think it means a lot to women to know that there's a company out there that's just doing that.
Right.
But it's different when you're just one person, you know, then how do you get past that? I don't know, you know, if we had the key to that, we could make so much money. It would be, I'm, you know, looking out here at some of the people I know in this audience who I know are struggling from the business point of view with this very problem all the time.
Yeah.
And wondering what the solutions are. She's a tough nut to crack.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
You know, your comment that, you know, she's all over the place in terms of, you know, where her interests are. I think one of the things that I've observed, and maybe you have too, is that women will view biking as one part of a pretty diverse set of things in her life. And there's an upside and a downside. You know, the upside in my mind is it's like kind of a fluid transition of, yeah, I'm a cyclist when I'm taking my kids to preschool. I'm a cyclist when I'm going out on the weekend for a ride, versus I'm a cyclist because I have, you know, the, you know, whatever shiny spandex on. But the flip side of that is I don't think that women often enough think of their athletic and transportational commitment to biking as being worthy enough to invest money in. And, you know, I try to acknowledge the everyday cyclist as being as worthy of celebration as the one who's racing on the weekend, because I think that's more descriptive of the way women include biking in their life. But I just don't know how to remind everybody that they deserve more. Men don't seem to have that problem. Men seem to be able to like, yep, I'm pretty hot stuff, and I'm gonna need this wheel set, and I'm gonna need, and I just don't think we're viewing ourselves quite that way.
I mean, maybe one way to look at it then is to look and see who has been successful doing this. Is there an apparel line? Is there another activity? You know, is there some model that you can base this on?
I think about running, and it used to be that men and women would wear the same running shoes, and you know, maybe it was Oprah running the marathon, or I don't know what, but women's running shoes are definitely, nobody would consider going to train for a 5K in a men's pair of shoes. It's sort of a given that, well, my feet are different, and therefore I'm going to. But I haven't seen that same parallel happen.
Well, you know, I'll tell you something interesting. Maybe this is the benefit of a little bit more years of looking at this. When I first introduced my line of custom bikes, they were just incredibly easy to sell. I mean, it was like you show up at a trade show with them or a consumer rally and they just blew out the door. Women, when I was selling, women, this is going to sound really weird. I mean, I don't, you know, just take it all with a grain of salt. But women were more women. They wanted to be women. They didn't want to be like the guys. They wanted to be themselves. I mean, that was, you know, the I'm woman, hear me roar stuff and everything. But now
Which
it's
I'm
almost
all for,
like
by the way.
Women don't want to be different. I don't want to be on a bike that has 650C wheels. I want, you know, everybody else is riding 700C. I want to look like everybody else. I want to be homogenized because I just feel like more of the gang. And I think that's working against us a little bit. And I don't know if it's just my perception or if you've seen that.
I encounter that a lot, and I had no idea when I first started designing and building bikes that
And when did you
wheel
first start?
size,
Just year-wise, where were we?
2005.
Okay.
Yeah, so quite a while after.
Yeah.
But I had no idea that wheel size was going to be political, you know.
That's the word for it. It is political.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know if you have this experience too, but oftentimes I'm dealing with a woman customer with all these bike enthusiast boyfriends, husbands.
That's the worst.
Whispering in her ear, telling her what she needs. And
Exactly. And so I have this kind of policy that you can have a boyfriend, you can have a dad. That doesn't cost you anything. But if he is a bike expert and I hear about it, that's going to start costing. Like the meter's running. Because I can only serve a woman and work with her directly. And typically, I quickly gain her trust that I'm really, you know, she hears that I have her best interests at heart and that I have the experience and, you know, I've seen the different options and I can help her choose the right one. But oftentimes it's just like, well, my boyfriend says 700C wheels are the only way to go and what I can't get the right, whatever. And yeah, so
true.
I don't know if you have a boyfriend charge, but.
No, but I wish I had thought of that. You know, we used to have the thing where we go to a rally and husband and wife or whatever would walk up and they both look at the bikes and she was going to be the buyer of the bike, but he's asking all the questions, you know?
Yep.
What derailleurs does it have? And I'd look at her and give her the answer. And then he would be like, what material is it made of? And he's probably like, who's buying this bike anyway? You know, why don't you go for a walk and come back later?
And one of the things that you kind of touched on is, well, it's our job to be totally nerded out on, you know, the gear inches and the angles and the millimeters and all of that jazz. When I work with a customer, I want her to feel like all she needs to know is what kind of riding she likes to do, and all she needs to know is like, you know, when we work with her on the fitting bike, hey, how's the saddle feeling? Like, she doesn't need to come to this with any huge bike knowledge. And most people expect that when you're getting a high-end or a custom bike, that you need to either have the credentials of being a racer or a bike nerd or whatever. Otherwise, you don't deserve a bike at that level. And I think that does everybody a great disservice, because you deserve and should ride a bike that fits well, no matter how you're buying it, regardless of how much nerdery
Knowledge
you come
you
to
have.
it with.
Yeah. Yeah, I find the same thing. I often send customers technical drawings of bikes so that they can see how they're different. And just like, sometimes I think it's kind of falling on a deaf audience. And I've learned to just talk a little bit more in the comfort terms, the easy to get up a hill, hard to get up a hill, great bike to hammer on, whatever.
Right.
Because it's a lingo that everybody understands, and it's just easier that way.
And often when you start asking those kind of questions, you find that the women do have an idea of what they want
Absolutely.
when you put it in those terms. And
Absolutely.
Like, oh, yeah, I'm going to use this to ride with my kids, or I'm going to commute 25 miles, or and I want.
And how do
this
you
and
commute?
that.
I commute at 20 miles an hour, and I hope nobody's on my tail. It's like, oh, okay, we got to rethink this a little bit.
Right.
A high note to end on. That was pretty funny. So I wanted to give an opportunity. We could take maybe about 3 questions from the audience. So if you have a question for Georgina, Natalie, or Karen, go ahead and raise your hand, and we will bring you the mic. If you want to maybe shout out your question, we might be able to hear you. Yeah, go ahead. She's coming. Oh, we got her over there. Is it on? He's got it. Give it a try.
Thank you so much for coming and talking about bikes for women. And I was struck by the comment you said about catching women on the front end as they start out in their 20s and 30s. I started out commuting on a bike when I was about 11, and that was to school. And I didn't buy my first car till I was 35 years old. And then I put on 15 pounds, so imagine a thinner me. And I was $10,000 a year richer, so I was thinner and richer. Until I moved to Texas. So, but what I feel is when I hear you talking about reaching out to women and having a bike that rides, we really need to be reaching out to kids so that bikes become a normal part of their life. I have a child, and we're working on a great Safe Routes to School program in our ISD. But one of the cool bike for elementary school and middle school is a BMX. That just is impractical. So how are you, as bicycle builders, reaching out to the young women who are 10 and 11 to get them on bikes?
Well, from what I can offer is kind of the investment in a really good fit, and that's what I focus on doing. And it's not as practical to fit a still growing body to a very expensive bike, and there is a lack of options for young women. And I've had plenty of really bike enthusiastic dads who are like, my 11-year-old is awesome, like she'll bike up Mount St. Helens, and she wants to go touring with me. And I can't do as much on that level for the average 11-year-old, just given where my business is focused. But what I do see and adore is the women who come to me and say, yeah, this is going to be a bike that I use with my kids. And sometimes that means, I built a bike for a woman who is riding with a 7-year-old, but she wanted a bike that was more upright so she could check where he was in traffic. And so we took into account her family rides in part of the design and the fit of the bike. The stability and an extra water bottle cage for his, because he had a BMX bike which doesn't have one. So yeah, I totally understand that problem. But I love the idea of when building bikes for women, they're often bikes that have a family context and a family intention. And beyond that, I just go safe routes to school.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say really that I've had no experience building bikes for children. And again, I think, the price point is part of the issue. But getting more kids on bikes, I think that's That's got to be a grassroots community level with safety absolutely at the top. And the big part of it is convincing parents it's safe. I mean, if parents are convinced, then they'll let kids ride. My own neighborhood is I live on a street that's about 7/10 of a mile long, and the darn parents drive to the head of the street to pick the kids up off the school bus because they can't walk 7/10 of a mile, you know, and I'm about to say to my neighborhood, let's just put a bike stand up at the front and let the kids ride their bikes up. They can lock them up during the day. We're in a nice neighborhood. Nobody's going to take them. Why should these kids be chauffeured 7/10 of a mile? I mean, come on. That's crazy.
Hello. Hi, I'm Ruthie Thompson. I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I want to go back to the discussion we were having is steel versus titanium versus carbon fiber and the perception that steel is heavy. We just got our first bike share system in Chattanooga, which we are very proud of, Bike Chattanooga. And bike share bikes, we're seeing, I think a lot of people in this room may know this, we're seeing where normally mode share between men and women on commuter bikes is 75-25, men to women. With bike share, it's 50-50. And these are 42-pound bicycles. I mean, they're tanks, and women are riding them. So I don't know, I'm just trying to engage the discussion here. Steel for us on a bike share bike isn't any big deal. We're using them, so maybe are we approaching this the wrong way? Steel is comfortable. It's cushy. You know, I ride a steel bike. So I just kind of want to see what your thoughts might be on that as a bicycle manufacturer, because you guys are making some really beautiful bicycles. They're awesome, and they're lighter. You're using chromoly and things like that. But the bike share bikes, they're tanks.
Yeah, I think people expect a bike share bike to be a tank. Mm-hmm. Because the darn thing has to be it's got to take a ton of abuse without any doubt. So I think it's just a mindset. Yeah, it's going to be heavy, but it's free or it's 25 cents or whatever, and it's going to get me where I'm going. But then, I mean, I wonder, does that translate? You take that customer who's been riding 42-pound steel commuter bike, and she goes for a custom bike, and it's like, it may perpetuate the steel is heavy thing all over again. Why should I buy a steel custom bike when my commuter bike weighs 42 pounds? I want to break out of that steel trap.
Yep. Yeah, one of my favorite bikes that we make is it's a step-through bike called the A-Line, and it has the same tube set as our more recreational road riding Century bike. And so it's got the same tube set and it's got the same drivetrain options. So compact, 10 speeds in the back. Like it's at a caliber that defies its aesthetic appearance. So it looks like it's that 42-pound clunker bike, and it is approachable in that same way because you're like, oh yeah, I don't have to have a time trial helmet on in order to ride this. But when you get on it, you realize, whoa, actually, I'm kind of hauling. And so I like that bike as sort of like the ambassador of, no, it doesn't have to be like that.
That's cool.
So we have time for one more question.
Hi, thank you ladies so much for the presentation. My question is, what would you recommend to a woman starting out in building bicycles, say a baby boomer with a mechanical background?
So you want to get started in the business of building them?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. Where do you live?
That was the question I asked when I first sat down.
In Chicago.
In Chicago. Oh,
Yes.
great place to be.
We want to know.
Well, I mean, there are a couple of ways you can do it. When I started doing it, there were no schools that taught people how to do it. So, just being a hardhead, I went out and bought a couple of books and got a torch and had a friend kind of teach me the basics and learned it that way. Natalie, you went to the
United Bicycle Institute.
Yeah, there are places where you can learn, and that launched her career.
Yeah, and I highly recommend it. And you're going to go through 2 weeks of really intense building a bike, and maybe you've never lit a torch before, and it doesn't matter. Like they'll walk you through it. But the real challenge is you've come home with your first frame, and now you're like, cool. I've got my garage, I got a workbench, and I've got this pile of tubes that I just ordered, and which end is which, and wait, how do I hook up the welding tanks without exploding myself? And so you need to have a lot of questions, and so you need to have a network of people who have related experience, frame builders if you can find them, who can say, yeah, it's cool, this is how you tell which end is which, and here's the tools that you're actually going to need, and don't worry about buying that yet. So you're going to, it's going to be a process of learning beyond just a 2-week course, but it's probably the best place to start.
Yeah, and I think probably in Chicago you will find some other custom frame builders there.
Oh, yeah.
And I found in my experience, and probably still true, those guys really do share information pretty readily. They love to talk about what they're doing. They'd be more than happy. And you can certainly call me or call Natalie.
Absolutely.
Is there such a thing as an apprentice program? Like, I don't know if you know any frame builders that would take someone to,
I
sweep up
took
the shop
someone
and-
on for a summer when I first got started to do all the drudge work.
There you go.
But I don't know. I mean,
I-
it never hurts to ask.
I had a really fortunate apprentice-type relationship. A couple of them. The two things that I came out of bike school realizing I needed to learn was, if I'm going to work with women, I need to really understand bike fit. And so I had a mentor in Michael Sylvester, who is a co-founder of the Serrata Fit School, and said, hey, cool, come over to my place and I will teach you everything I know. And so over the period of a few years, I sat in on countless fittings and watched everything from triathlon bikes to mountain bikes being fit, and we worked with my customers. So that was a really great apprenticeship kind of thing. And similarly, one of the first Portland frame builders, Andy Newlands of Strawberry Bicycles, said, why don't you come work in my shop with me for a while, and I'll teach you everything about working with a lathe and a mill, and really kind of get you up to speed on machine tools. And that was an incredible opportunity. But I think I had an advantage in that I was willing to say, there's a ton of stuff I don't know, but I really want to know. And I think some of the men starting out have a feeling like they need to present themselves as having already got it all under control. But if you approach it with an open mind and really say, boy, I admire what you do, can you show me? I've been amazed at how much I've been able to learn from people.
And the other thing too is, eventually you'll get to that mill and lathe part, but you can do everything with hand tools in the beginning. You can file miters on tubes and do all that with just a hacksaw, a couple of files, some sandpaper, some string, and a ruler.
Yep.
Honest to gosh, I'm serious. I'm
That's
dead serious.
encouraging.
Yeah, that's what I started out with.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
Okay,
Cool.
thank you.
Good luck.
Well, so thank you to Georgina and Natalie and Karen for a lovely conversation that was really engaging and interactive. I very much enjoyed it. A few program notes, because I know this space is